The Mandalorian, Episode 6, Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. The episode starts on a good note. A Quarren freighter minding its own business suddenly gets intercepted by an Imperial light cruiser, which had me thinking, oh, it's likely probably some random Imperial warlord, but nope. As it turns out, it's Bo's former Night Owl crew, and no, it seems I was wrong in my theory, as they weren't the ones to save Gideon, as otherwise he'd had been with them in the control room after all. No, instead the Night Owls, now mercenaries led by Axe Woves, are being paid by someone else to show up to break up a Mon Cal and Quarren forbidden love. Which of course they could care less about, as they're only here to bring the Mon Calamari prince back home. So essentially this opener is Romeo and Juliet in space between some space fish, with space Spartans in a space Nazi ship swooping in to take back Romeo. And okay, why not? Aesthetically, there's a lot of good things to say here, as I think this is the first time we've ever seen a Quarren ship, which definitely does look unique and far away from anything else we've seen before. And I definitely dig the whole concept of having the Quarren captain chilling in a water bowl. It's strange, but it makes sense and is exactly the sort of weird thing I'd expect to see in an alien ship, especially one that, well, comes from an underworld civilization. We then afterwards see Bo-Katan's gauntlet traveling to some unidentified planet, which made me confused because I figured after the last episode, Bo would be maybe put to the side and we'd get episodes, focusing on the show's two main characters again, Din and Grogu. But this is quickly answered as, hey, as it turns out, Din and Grogu are traveling with Bo now. I don't know exactly why, as last episode it made it look like Bo was leaving to do her own mission solo. It didn't show her asking Din if he could join her, and I don't see Din asking her if she needed some company, so yeah. But here they are now together trying to get all the Mandalorians to join up again. Once the two do enter the atmosphere of the planet known as Plaisir 15, a real no-name planet that neither of them know or ever heard of, their plans to meet up with Axe Woves is then derailed as the Plaisir 15 security takes over their ship and forces them to land and meet with the planet rulers instead. And well, this is the moment I had a gut feeling things were going to turn bad, and I was right. As things start off with these goofy repurposed stormtrooper armor, which alone was a dead giveaway that this episode was heading downhill pretty fast. As how lazy was the costume department here to come up with this silly idea? I mean, imagine for a second if for a few years after World War II, and some city has their guards walking around in Nazi suits with a dash of bright colors added in. Yeah, I don't think that would go well with the locals either. It's really dumb. Then we're introduced to a very random celebrity cameo featuring Jack Black and Lizzo as Bombardier and the Duchess. Bombardier is a former Imperial that is now reformed, which honestly I'm super curious to had seen him in his Imperial days, as I honestly can't picture Jack Black as a convincing space Nazi. And as for the Duchess, I'll make a quick confession here, but I never heard of Lizzo before her appearance in this episode. Although I figured she had to be a famous celeb, as there's no way they'd hire someone who simply can't act to save their life in here. Nothing against her, but that's just the truth. And well, even Jack Black's performance wasn't any good either, so yikes. It just seems like a bad idea having these two play these roles. I think it would have maybe been better if it was some other actors, but yeah, anyway. The two admit to hiring Bo's old crew as mercs, but will only let Bo speak to them if she and Din agree to do a side quest. And seeing as Bo is already on a side quest of her own, then this pretty much puts her, I guess, in a side quest within a side quest. Good start for this episode already, right? Then when Bo asks them why they couldn't just have their Mando mercs do this job for them, their response basically was, well, we can't let Mandalorians with weapons into our city, but hey, you two are Mandalorians, right? Weapons are part of your culture, so you're okay. Like, what? Excuse me, what? This kind of logic makes sense in what world again? We then see next Christopher Lloyd playing as the Security Commissioner Hellgate, explaining to Din and Bo about a mysterious malfunctioning droid problem that they're dealing with, and that practically everyone on the planet is also incredibly lazy, using the droids for every single thing in their lives. And from here, the Mando duo start their little game of detective as they try to find the cause for all of these droid malfunctions, with Din wanting to start with the Ugnaughts, and this part was weird, as at first they're ignoring him, but once he tells them that he was a friend of Kawil, then they suddenly acknowledge him. Okay, how does that work exactly? Like, does it make any sense? I very much doubt every single Ugnaught in the galaxy knows each other, unless of the off chance that Kawil used to work exactly right here before he retired, which, well, maybe, but the incredible convenience of that being the case here, I just don't see it. Then the Ugnaughts get angry at the two, telling them that their work is flawless and the droids are not malfunctioning at all. Only to, after a minute, be like, yeah, well, here are the locations of the droids that are going to be malfunctioning soon. So, yeah, wow, what a 180 right there, saying that there is no problem and then suddenly semi-admitting to it. And secondly, how do they even know that the droids are going to be malfunctioning? If they're so knowledgeable about this, can't they let the administrator know ahead of time on which droids they should look into and shut down? Then, out of pure convenience, Din manages to find the one malfunctioning super battle droid in a loading dock out of 100 that are currently there. The droid tries to make a getaway, which, since when can battle droids run like that, especially super battle droids? 'Cause dang. Despite this, Din still outsmarts the battle droid and takes it out. With, of course, Bo helping as well. Well, she shot right afterwards when Din shot, so yeah, she helped, kinda. Afterwards, Din and Bo take a detour to a droid bar, which, while a neat idea on paper, is really just a waste of time here if you think about it, as we learn absolutely nothing new here other than the droids who come here drink a lubricant called Nepenthe, and a lot of those who malfunctioned drank from apparently a bad batch. And as well, also learning that all of these droids here love apparently being slaves to humans too. Bo and Din then afterwards go into a forensics lab, which is exactly what they should have done in the first place because, you know, maybe examine the droid you caught to find out what's exactly wrong with it. And after taking a sample of its fluid, aka droid blood, Din and Bo make a discovery that the answer behind the malfunctioning droids was former Techno-Union nanodroids, which got into a batch of Nepenthe that all of these malfunctioned droids were drinking from. And not only is the arrival of them here illegal, but the one who ordered and well signed for them is none other than Hellgate. And yes, all of these answers are basically given to them right off the bat here on the nanodroid's chain code, which would have been completely missed too if not for Din and Bo, because somehow they're better at forensics analysis than the lab tech working here, who, you know, does this for a living. Not only that, but the lab tech also gets hit by a laser of a droid just moments before this, which would make you think, oh dang, did she get her arm sliced off by that metal piercing laser? Or at the very least have some kind of wound? But nope, as it turns out, she doesn't even have a scratch, almost as if nothing had happened. Yup, marvelous work here, ha. And well, now that I think about it, couldn't Din and Bo just ask to analyze the fluid sample of any of the dozens of previously malfunctioned droids before doing all of this? As no matter whose fluid they'd take a sample of, they'd get the same answer. Basically learning about the nanodroids and all of that, and they'd be done pretty quickly. No, really, that would have saved us so much time in this episode. I mean, sure, they wouldn't have known about the Nepenthe and how the nanodroids got into the malfunctioned droids in the first place. Even then, it wouldn't really matter. They would just know that the nanodroids were causing the malfunctions and that the nanodroids were signed off by Hellgate. And that's all they really need anyway to know who the culprit in all of this is. Hence why I said before that the droid bar scene was kinda pointless and a waste of time if you really think about it. Knowing who the culprit was, Din and Bo then confront and arrest Hellgate, who admits to the whole thing and being a separatist. Which, I'll admit, it was cool to hear him mention Count Dooku, probably the only good thing from this whole interaction in my opinion. As then after we're given the most cringiest scene in the entire episode as Hellgate admits his wrongdoings to Bombardier and the Duchess. And well, the acting and writing here feels like something straight from some very low budget B-movie. It's just not good. Then Bo and Din are also awarded the key to Plaisir, which is pretty much a useless reward and excuse for them having to go through all of this nonsense. As well, Grogu being knighted for doing absolutely nothing in this entire episode other than look cute and act as a pet for the Duchess. Finally, after wasting 30 or so minutes on all of that, Bo and Din are allowed to speak with Axe Woves, who's just chilling with the rest of his Mandos at their parked fleet just outside the city. And I gotta say, it's a pretty impressive fleet at that. Bo challenges him to the right to retake her old fleet, and suffice to say, this one-on-one battle was hands down the best part of the entire episode. It's short, but it's pretty good, and of course it goes exactly the way you'd expect it to go with Bo winning in the end, but the fight is no doubt entertaining. Seeing all the different Mando weaponry being used and Axe giving Bo a pretty decent challenge. However, even with the victory here, Axe says it means nothing, as Bo still doesn't have the Darksaber and should be challenging Din for it, not him. To which she basically ignores his whole statement here and says something completely irrelevant because, yeah. Did I not mention already that the writing here is tragically bad? She says something about not wanting to spill any more blood, which she doesn't have to do that. She can take on Din and do the exact same thing she did with Axe. You know, have one of them yield and not die. But yeah, the bad writing here completely ignores all of this. Then things get a little bit more weird as Axe goes off on Din, not only calling him a zealot, but also being racist towards him, as he belittles Din's Mandalorian status, saying that he doesn't have a drop of Mandalorian blood in him, which, first of all, how would Axe even know this? Does he have records to Din's medical family history? And secondly, who cares? As being Mandalorian is a culture first and foremost, at least for all of these Mandos here, as anyone of any race, skin color, be it white, brown, black, yellow, purple, green, etc. can become a Mandalorian if they want to. Not to mention, if we're talking about the full-blooded Mandos, which as we saw in the Clone Wars to be Caucasians with blonde hair and blue eyes, which I suppose is George Lucas's take on the Aryan race, Then, well, if we're gonna go by that, then half of the Mandos in this scene alone aren't real Mandalorians either. Certainly not Axe Woves, Casca Reeves, and most definitely not the Black Mando in the background with the dreads. So yeah, I have absolutely no idea why they decided to give Axe this racist take when not only does it serve no purpose here, but also is quite rich coming from a guy who has no Mandalorian blood himself. The episode then ends off with Din handing the Darksaber off to Bo, telling Axe that she rightfully deserves it as she defeated the cyborg being that captured him on Mandalore. Which is interesting, as I didn't think it worked like that. I always figured the Darksaber had to be won through direct combat. Yet instead, through a technicality that they seem to make up right on the spot for convenience, Bo is once again handed the Darksaber without earning it through direct combat. Not to mention, couldn't Din just had given Bo the Darksaber like literally right at the start of this episode and avoid all of this in the first place? Instead, he waits right at the very end here, and this also makes me wonder, why do all of these Mandos, especially Axe the racist who doesn't like Din, suddenly believe him without any proof whatsoever? I mean, if it was that easy to convince them that she was the rightful owner of the Darksaber, then they should have made up an even better story a while ago. Overall, it shouldn't come to any surprise that I think this episode was a dud. Most definitely the weakest writing in the entire season thus far, with so much pointless filler, contrivances, and flat acting that really has no place in this series, especially this far in. Like, sure, it was pretty to look at, but that's about it. And in a series like The Mandalorian, I think you need more than just that. I also can't overstate how the weird celebrity cameos really took me out of it too, and I like Christopher Lloyd and Jack Black too, but even their performances here were not good. And don't get me started on Lizzo. Plus, Grogu was once again a background prop, Din felt more like a sidekick to Bo, and instead, with moving on with the plot, we spent a majority of the episode solving a droid murder mystery that was terribly done. And the actual meaningful plot of the episode is shoved in right at the last 5 minutes. Now, I get it, there's time and space for goofy stories like this in Star Wars too, and if Season 3 had, say, I don't know, 20 episodes or so in it, then I probably wouldn't have complained so much. I mean, it's still a bad episode in my opinion based on all the problems that I mentioned. You can't just simply ignore all of that, but still, I would have gone softer on it. But to stick this right before the last 2 episodes in a short 8-episode season, which might I add, Gideon, the supposed big bad of the season, has still yet to appear, then that's unfortunately a big no from me. And that was my take on this episode of The Mandalorian. Let me know what you all thought about the episode in the comments below, and if you haven't already, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.